kind of a backstory on the subtitle to the book. And I can't see anything but this light, so are you out there? I wanted it to be a breathtaking journey toward a life of surrender. And the publisher's like, no, nobody wants to surrender. That thing is just gonna sit there on the shelf. And I thought it was really interesting because, I thought that surrender felt more true to the journey because I went to New York looking for meaning and instead I found surrender. So I really wanted to tell that story in its entirety and the purity of what that process looked like. And he's like, the whole team was like, that's just not gonna sell. So I decided, because I don't take no for an answer very well, I decided to pull 100 women. And I asked them nationwide through my little Facebook friends, which would you buy? A breathtaking journey toward a life of meaning or a breathtaking journey toward a life of surrender? And interestingly enough, everyone was like, definitely surrender or definitely meaning. I mean, there was no haphazard opinion on it. It was very dogmatic. And what was so hilarious is that most of the surrenders were New Yorkers. And most of the meanings were in the middle of the coasts. And I thought, now is there a common theme here that we as New Yorkers are so beat down and haggard? We're like, I'm done already. Do what you will. Or are those of us in the middle of the country going, is this all there is? Is there more? Am I gonna just do Target returns and, go to Starbucks 4 times a day and get out my laptop and write something? So I just thought that was, that's extra. That is taking up part of my 7 minutes. But I thought that was an interesting dynamic on our view of meaning or surrender. But I'd like to share, just in the few moments that we have, that there is a very direct connection between surrender and flourishing. It is. It's the kingdom. It's the upside down, that the last shall be first. If we lose our life, we'll find it. That his strength is made perfect in our weakness. It's just what we read throughout Scripture. And I think when we follow that narrative out, we find that that's true. So I already shared my story this morning. I won't bore you with it again, but essentially I moved to New York and I crashed and burned. And I chronicle that in Freefall to Fly. But the essence was that in the 18 months that after I got there, I was gripped by panic and fear. Panic attacks, avoiding subways, trains, elevators, crowds. That's impossible to do in the city, but nonetheless I tried. I live a life that was crippled, and we had a woman came in and she talked to our whole Q audience. We had her come in. Her name is Bobette Buster. And she leads this storytelling. She consults for Pixar. She's brilliant. And she talks about this epic, grand story. Every one of them has a narrative arc where the protagonist ventures out. He starts with being unsettled, or he starts with status quo, then he's unsettled, then he ventures out, and then there's free fall, and then there's a proactive choice, and it goes on and on and on until stage 10 where he finds transformation. And every grand theme, every life story entails these 10 steps, and we're all just edge of our seat, writing this down, what stage are you in? What stage are you in? Oh, I think I'm in 3. No, I'm back in relapse, And so we were all over the place, but what it unlocked for all of us was to see that there is actually a grand story. There is a narrative arc for each of us. And we're gonna find seasons in our life that ultimately take us towards these stages of transformation. And what's so unique about this story, and I heard all this literally about a month after I'd kind of felt like I'd walked those and then some, is that stage 9 is, guess what? Surrender. 9, that's surrender. That's following relapse, which is the worst of the worst, which is a despair that believes that I will never actually change. It's when you've believed that depression is a loss of hope, but despair is a fear that you'll never change. And following that is surrender. And following that is something called transubstantiation, which is a physical change in body, From what you were, you are no longer, and now who you are is fully redeemed and fully restored. And that as you face this cycle going on, like for the rest of your life, you're still going to face adversity, but you're going to come at it from a transubstantiated place that is no longer the way that it was before. So you will meet adversity with armor that says, God, like the psalmist, when God says, remember what I did over here and here and here and here, when you're in the middle of your lament, that I have begun a work and I will continue that, and you will stand armored and knowing that as you face adversity, so therein will he meet you. So then that's what surrender looked like. And for me, I wrote a poem on the inside flap of the book that basically just God gave me about a week after September 20th of 2011 when I met surrender. And I start with saying that surrender changes everything, but we can't choose it. It chooses us. And it finds us in our darkest moment, in our loneliest hours, when we're cuddled and curled on the edge of the floor, and we start to believe that we have lived a life of purposelessness and despair, and how could it be that a good God would order all these things? And he says, no, I am here, and I am truth, and I love you, and I see you redeemed. Let me rename you. Let me take you back to the way I knit you in your mother's womb. All this for my glory. And I think that's just a promise that he just wants us to come to the end of ourselves, where the life that we've ordered and orchestrated just falls flat. And he says, I have exceeding an abundance above all you could ask or think, if you dare believe it. If you dare surrender to the buttoned up, pretty, perfect life that you thought it would be. No. I have far more. And so surrender is a pivotal moment. It's what transforms everything. And when we become transubstantiated, then we enter into something that I love to call a surrendered life. And that life basically says that I'm not in control anymore. I'm done. I'm not going to dictate tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, because you're at the helm. And so I have a word for every year. In 2011, it was rescue. In 2012, it was retreat. And in 2013, it was open. And basically, that word said, God, whatever door you open, I will walk through. I'm not in charge. From now on, you are in charge. And I will say yes. And you need to make it really clear. And you need to give me the courage to say yes to something that's very unknown. And this year, I have been in more uncharted territory than I have ever been in my entire life. And yet that I know that it is from him, because surrender says, I'm no longer going to dictate how this goes down. And my time is up. So we'll go from there.